Hey everyone, it's James from Tin Robot Games, and today we're going to learn how to play Guarding Geckos. Guarding Geckos, each player is going to play as a family of 5 geckos, and you're going to try to capture as many bug points as you can throughout this game. Now this game does play 2 to 6 players. We have 6 player colors. For those who are colorblind, our player components are colorblind friendly. So for instance, if you are playing, 2 players are playing as the blue and the green geckos, simply choose which the player is going to play as the pattern side of their gecko. So let's set up the board. First, find the starting hex tile, which has a hole in the center. Place that in the center of the board. Next, you're going to create a market. The market consists of 2 different types of objective cards. We have the terrain objectives and we have the bug objectives. Shuffle the cards, place 1 pile at each end of the row, and then deal out 3 cards coming into the center of the row from each individual side. This will result in 3 terrain objectives and 3 bug objectives at any given time. Next, take the secret objective cards, which are a combination of terrain and bug secret objectives, and we'll get into these in a second. Shuffle these up and deal 1 to each player. Next, take the hex tiles in the game, give them a good shuffle, and then deal 3 of these out to each player as well. Place all the bug meeples to the side of the board within reach of all players. All right, now we're ready to begin. Randomly choose the first player. The last player in the turn order, going clockwise, is going to choose what the starting meeple is. It's going to go in the center of this starting hex tile. Since the last player is going to be the last person to have the chance to grab one of these particular cards, they're going to want to probably choose a bug that is not going to help one of the other players. So in this case, none of the objectives actually contain the fruit fly. So last player, let's start off with the fruit fly in this case. Let's talk tile placement. Now on a player's turn, the decision is quite simple. They just have to simply place a hex tile and then place a gecko on it. Once you've placed your 5th gecko, each subsequent turn, you must remove one of the geckos you have on the board and move it to the new tile that you've placed. It's important to note that once you place a gecko, you cannot move that gecko until all your geckos have been placed on the table. When you move a gecko, you can only place it on a tile that you have placed. You can't move it to, say, a tile that's already on the board. It must connect to a tile that you're placing across the matching pattern. Now, when placing a hex tile, you must ensure that at least one side of that tile matches the pattern on the tile that you're connecting it to. So in this case, say we're placing down this cricket tile. I'm connecting the flowers, the matching pattern, and then I'm going to take one of my geckos and I'm going to span the distance between the 2 bugs on these hex tiles. My turn's now done, and I'm going to pick up a new hex tile. Now when placing hex tiles, there's 3 key things that you're trying to achieve in this game. The first thing you want to achieve is you want to try to collect these bugs by trapping them. And how we do that is by fully encircling a hex tile. Once a hex tile is fully encircled, the bug that's in the center of that tile is awarded to the player who has the most geckos touching that center tile. Now, if there's a tie, the person who placed the last tile is going to determine who breaks that particular tie. And if they're one of the ones that are touching that tile, of course, they're going to choose themselves. So let's see what that might look like. Now, you'll notice when I'm placing these tiles, I am only making sure that one side is connecting to the adjacent hex tile. Now, there might be some cases where you can match all sides that you're connecting to, and that's fine. You can choose where your gecko is going to span, but you only have to connect a minimum of one side. So here we are. Say we're back to the green player, and the green player has a tile they can place. They fully encircle this center tile. They span the blue water. Green and black are tied for 2 geckos each. Green placed the last tile, so they win the tie. In this case, they're now awarded a fruit fly, and that gets added to their personal storage. And that's basically how you trap a bug. Now, of course, you get a point at the end of the game for each of these trap bugs that you can collect. However, during the game, there's an additional option for you as a player where you can exchange one of these meeples back to the general supply and draft 3 new cards into your hand. So in this case, say I had 3 cards in my hand, I draft 3 new hex tiles up into my hand. I would look at them, decide how I want to play these out based on the current objectives. I'm going to keep these 3. The 3 you don't want, go to the bottom of the pile, and then you start your turn with the 3 remaining tiles. Now let's get into these objectives. Now at the bottom of each of these cards, you'll see that there's a number of bugs. Each of these bugs represents 1 point at the end of the game. All right, now let's get into the bug objectives. There's 3 different types of bug objectives in this game. There are parallel connections, there are individual bugs that are not connected, and then we have bug chains, where you're connecting from one bug to another to another. I'm going to show you very quickly how each of these 3 bug objectives would score during your turn. When looking at the board, essentially what these cards represent is the bugs that are on the center of these hex tiles. And your objective as a player is to try to make connections between these different bugs as you're creating these different chains with your family of geckos to match the pattern that's on these cards and claim them. To make this easier to illustrate, I'm going to remove all the other geckos and just leave green on the table for now. So say this was their objective with the parallel linked bugs. In this case, what you would see is we have the cricket touching the mealworm, and we have the ladybug touching the moth. This objective would score. The player would take this card and place it in front of them. For 4 separate bugs, you simply have to be touching each of those bugs. In this case, we can see that the player is touching the cricket, they're touching the mealworm, they're touching a grasshopper, and they're touching a ladybug. They would have scored this card. And for the last one, bug chains, you simply have to connect the bugs in the sequence shown. So in this case, we have a ladybug connected to a grasshopper, connected to a moth. They form a continuous chain, they would score this card. Now let's talk about the terrain objectives. Terrain objectives are different than the bug objectives. The bug objectives, you're trying to connect bugs. You're trying to make these chains of bugs across your different geckos. With the terrain objectives, you must occupy those terrains simultaneously across your gecko family. Terrain objectives are the same regardless of whether you are trying to connect 3 terrains, 4, or 5. In this case, we're connecting 4. Your geckos would have to occupy all 4 of these patterns at the same time. Each diamond represents the spanning of the pattern across 2 different hex tiles. So in this case, we have a gecko spanning grass, we have a gecko spanning rock, we have a gecko spanning the 3 flower pattern, and then if they're placing their last hex tile and spanning the other flower pattern, they have now achieved spanning of all 4 of these patterns. They would claim this objective card and place it in front of them. Now it's important to note that you can only claim the card on your turn after placing a tile that contributes to that particular card. There are going to be some instances through this game where, based on another player's actions, when it gets to your turn, you've already achieved the objective of that card. So that we don't have people just grabbing cards as they go and claim these cards based on random circumstance, it's important that they have to make sure they're placing a tile that's going to contribute to that objective in order to claim it. And that is the core elements of how to play Garden Geckos. Now let's get into some of these other elements. Let's start with end of game base scoring first. It's very simple. You get 1 point for each bug that appears on an objective card you've collected, plus 1 point for each bug that you've trapped. In this case, there's 12 bugs in the cards, plus 3 bugs that they've trapped, a total of 15 points. A player would add their bonus points to their base score. The secret bonus objective for bugs awards a player 2 bonus points for each matching bug on their objective cards and their trap bugs awarded at the end of the game. In this case, this player has the secret objective of the grasshopper. They have 1, 2, 3 grasshoppers on their cards. They have 1 grasshopper as a meeple off to the side. That's 4 grasshoppers in total. They get 2 points for each. So they've got a bonus of 8 points if they add to their base score of 15. So they have a total finish score of 23. Now let's say the player had the 3 flowers as a terrain secret objective. This is how this would score. In this case, I've removed all the geckos to make it easy to illustrate. So the player's first going to identify the largest connected pattern they can find of those 3 flowers. In this case, is this area right here. They're going to add up 1 point for each segment that's connected as part of that pattern. So in this case, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they would have 7 bonus points. Be mindful that if the starting tile is part of the pattern, this counts as 1 segment. If you have a double tile, it counts as 2 segments. As a final note, the player's geckos do not have to be touching this interconnected pattern at the end of the game in order to score it. Now, how does this game come to an end? The end game is triggered in Garden Geckos one of 3 different ways. First, when the last hex tile is drafted, not played, but drafted. Second, when a player collects their 6th objective card. Or third, when the last of any of the bug varieties is claimed. The game is immediately over. We're going to again finish out that player turn order, and then we're going to count up our points. Now, you may have noticed in the book that there's actually advanced scoring rules. These are for more advanced players because there is a little more thinkiness to it as you're doing the scoring. Well, let's talk about that really quickly. During the game, you're collecting different objectives, and specifically with the bug objectives, any card that you've collected, if during the game you're able to trap meeples that match the meeples on that card, the value of the bugs on the bottom of that card are going to double. So in this case, there's 3 bugs on the bottom of this card. This card would actually be worth 6 if I was able to cover this up with a moth, a ladybug, a mealworm, and a cricket. And that's how you play Guarding Geckos. This game is going to last between 20 and 40 minutes, depending on the player count. It's a blast, it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of replayability in it. I hope you enjoy playing this as much as I enjoyed making it. For now, cheers.